Want to know the best Secrets of Strixhaven Precon cards? We're going to take a look at each Precon and dive into themes, great new cards, and big money reprints. We're going to kick things off by talking about Silverquill Influence, led by Killian, Decisive Mentor. Similarly to Ariad of the Charmed Apple from Wilds of Eldraine Commander, Killian rewards you for enchanting your opponent's creatures with auras like Coercive Impetus and the other cards from the Impetus cycle. It can tap your opponent's creatures down, goad them, and it also draws you cards. All for 3 mana? Looks pretty dope to me. The secondary commander, Scriv the Obligator, is a 2/3 flying Death Toucher for 2, a white, and a black. It creates contract aura tokens when it attacks or enters. These contracts buff your opponent's creatures if they attack anyone other than you, and they'll drain your opponent's life if they do attack you. It's a semi-political option for the deck, but in my opinion it looks strictly less powerful than Killian. In terms of new cards, Defacing Duskmage is a strong 2-drop that wields the new Prepared mechanic. For a white and a black, you get a 2/2 with Death Touch that becomes prepared whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn. Its prepared spell costs 1, a white, and a black, and it'll draw you 2 cards and have each player lose 2 life. Having a repeatable option to draw 2 cards at instant speed is incredibly powerful. Forum Filibuster may be 5 mana, but its effect is excellent in Casual Commander. Creating a 2/1 flyer each of your upkeeps is solid, but recurring an aura or equipment and automatically attaching it to that 2/1 flyer is ridiculous. With powerful auras like Eldrazi Conscription and Gift of Immortality in the deck, this one is sure to be a hit. Eiganjo Dynastorian is ridiculous. Replenish is one of, if not the best, enchantment recursion spells in the entire game. Especially in a Precon that cares so much about auras, Replenish is incredible. Having to attack with 2 creatures to prepare it is a little bit of a shame, but that's a pretty small prerequisite considering the giant payoff you're getting in return. Land Tax is incredibly optimal early game ramp in white, and copies go for $20 or more. Inkshield is incredible. It can protect you from losing the game to big damage and give you a huge board of creatures, and it's currently sitting around $10. Arcane Lighthouse, a solid utility land, is around $6. Prismari Artistry is an interesting twist on what blue-red decks usually do best, casting big instants and sorceries. However, this list adds a little bit of an aggro twist to it. The Precon is led by Rutha Mastering the Moment. She encourages you to cast high-cost instants and sorceries and will give you a giant hasty flyer in exchange. Muddle the Ever-Changing is the secondary commander, and it plays very well with Precon exclusive cards like Leitmotif Composer and big money reprints in the deck like Goldspan Dragon. Giving Myriad to your coolest non-legendary creatures is quite strong, and it opens up a wide variety of options for upgrades. Dirgur Focus Mage is a super solid new card that reduces the cost of your instants and sorceries, and its prepare cost is easy to fulfill. Its prepare spell, Brain Geyser, can draw you tons and tons of cards. I suspect that many of these prepare creatures are going to become future commander staples. Inspired Sky Painter is another prepare creature that's relatively easy to get going. All you need to do is get some damage in with a creature token, or have it enter the battlefield normally, or with a blink or flicker effect. Its prepare spell is a bit pricey at 5 mana, but the effect is so powerful and there's plenty of cost reduction in the deck too. The reprints in this deck are bonkers. We've got Fairy Mastermind at around $20, Rionia Fire Dancer, Goldspan Dragon, and Harmonic Prodigy at around $10, Veyran Voice of Duality is $7, and Twin Flame, Mana Geyser, and Stormkiln Artist in the $1 to $5 range. I would not be surprised if this Precon ended up being a little pricier than the others, kind of like Sultai Arisen was in Tarkir Dragonstorm. Do you know what the real big money reprint here is? It's the subscribe button, and it's right down there. The Witherbloom Pestilence deck wants you to commit to an Aristocrat's game plan, but it also wants you to be swinging out as well. It's full of cards that gain and drain, and both of its commanders will help grow your sack fodder into big attackers. The face commander is Dina, who can draw you a card at least once per turn, which is alright. Furthermore, her second line of text can sacrifice you that creature, and it'll gain you life and buff another creature in one fell swoop. It's a decent green-black Aristocrats commander, but that 1 card per turn restriction is such a bummer. The secondary commander here is my kinda commander. For 1, a black, and a green, you get Gorma the Gullet, a 1/1 lifelinking pest frog. Not only that, but whenever another creature you control dies, you put a 1/1 counter on it. This is already a great effect in an Aristocrats deck like this, but the third line of text really sets it apart. Non-token creatures you control enter with an additional 1/1 counter on it for each creature that died under your control this turn. Imagine the glory of sacrificing 10 pests, gaining 10 life, putting 10 counters on Gorma, then getting a bunch of other giant creatures? Aggro and Aristocrats is cool in my book. Defiling Demagoth is a new black game ender that does incredible work in this precon. Gaining 1 damage whenever a creature you control connects is visceral in a deck with so many Saprolings and Pests. Speaking of gain and drain, Stensian Sanguinist is literally exsanguinate on a stick. While its prepare cost is fairly difficult to attain, especially in the late game, sometimes all you need is 1 good exsanguinate to completely turn a game around. Whoa, this is actually huge. Ominous Harvest is the 3rd ever card we've seen with Gravestorm. This is basically the Aristocrats version of one of Magic's most broken mechanics, Storm. You get to copy spells with Gravestorm for each permanent put into a graveyard from the battlefield this turn. Furthermore, if you cast this one after wiping the board, you might be able to take an opponent or 2 out. For reprints, we've got Oron Frostfang at $10, Toxic Deluge at $7, Tendershoot Dryad at $3, and Michaeloth also at $3. Honestly, not a ton of value in the reprints here, but the new cards in this deck are absolutely stellar. Lorehold Spirit is a white-red graveyard deck. It flavorfully embodies Lorehold, the Strixhaven college full of archaeologists and adventurers. The deck is full of Leaves the Graveyard synergies, and both commanders support that quite well. Interesting, a Planeswalker in the command zone. Quandrix History Chaser cares about cards leaving your graveyard. Its +1 ability can discard you cards, draw you cards, and mill all in one fell swoop. Its -4 ability will give the spirits it already creates for you Vigilance and Double Strike, which is pretty dang good. There are also plenty of non-token spirits in the deck that'll benefit here as well. The secondary commander here is Excava, the Risen Past. Whenever Excava attacks, you get a recursion effect that can hit 3-cost artifacts, creatures, and non-aura enchantments. The wild thing here is that it turns them into creatures if they weren't creatures already, which can enable all sorts of blink and clone shenanigans. In a deck that cares so much about the graveyard, a card like this works incredibly well. The deck is absolutely packed with 3-cost creatures. I honestly think that Excava might be a stronger option than Quandrix. For new cards, we've got things like Lorehold Archivist, which has a really easy preparable spell. All you need is to follow the game plan of the deck and fill up your yard. Since it triggers on upkeep, you'll usually only get it once per turn, but again, creating copies of things that don't sacrifice or exile out of blue is very strong. Noctamen Lore Spinner is a very cool and normal spell that can cast Wheel of Fortune? Okay, cool. Unfortunately, it has one of the worst possible prepare qualifications out there, so I'm not too sure if this one's gonna see play. Advanced Reconstruction is a sweet new class that synergizes well with both of the commanders in the deck. Its first ability is only okay, providing an element of chance to a classic Impulse Draw effect. Its second ability is quite strong, working well with recursion creatures in the deck like Karmic Guide, Sun Titan, and Sarah Paragon. Cost reduction is a nice bonus at that 3rd level as well. We've got some decent reprints in this one. Moonshaker Cavalry is hovering around $12 right now, and Drum Bellower is closer to $15, which makes sense for a white pseudo Seedborn Muse effect. Currency Converter is around $15, and Lotus Field is around $7. For Quandrix, we've got Zimone, Infinite Analyst, and she is all about X spells. Cast X spells, put counters on Zimone, and reduce the cost of your first X spell each turn. Sadly, we've got that first spell each turn clause here, but honestly, cost reduction in the command zone is still pretty good. The secondary commander is a fractal wolf called Primo the Unbound, and it's a super sweet Simic aggro commander. Entering with twice X counters means it'll usually hit the field with good stats. Also, it triggers once per player you hit, so you'll surely be creating tons of big body fractals if you put this doggy in the command zone. Alright, so there's a new card in this deck that puts the most banned ever card on a creature. There aren't really words to describe how broken Channel is. For 2 mana, you can basically get as much colorless mana as you want in exchange for life. Yavimaya Bloomsage is somewhat hard to prepare, so you usually won't be able to cast Channel in the early game. But this one is going to be a late game menace for sure. Expansion Algorithm works like a charm in this deck. Zimone will reduce its cost, and its resolution will make sure the next X spell you cast next turn is a huge problem, all while buffing your board. Whoa, Nexus Mentality is definitely an instant that's going to see a ton of play. It can move counters around, or it can draw you a ton of cards, or it can do both if you control a commander. We've definitely got some pretty solid reprints in this one. Benevolent Hydra is a super efficient way to speed up your 1/1 counter strategies, and it currently costs $11. Unbound Flourishing is a very powerful enchantment, and it is a must-have in X-Spell decks. It's currently around $15. Goldvein Hydra is $8, and it's a superb attacker. Opponents always hesitate to block a hasty, vigilant trampler that can create a ton of treasures when it dies. Guardian Augmenter, which is a flash speed lore and hexproof enabler, is currently going for $10. Ozolith the Shattered Spire is around $10, and much like Benevolent Hydra, this one is going to speed up your counter production, which is key in this deck. That brings us to the end of our Precon review, but I want to do an honorable mention for a couple of cards that I think are really cool. The Turbulent Land Cycle is a new suite of lands that check to see if your opponents control 8 lands total. This means that, in most cases, these are only tapped lands up to turn 2. It feels really good to have a cycle of slow lands that don't feel totally unplayable. Additionally, these new lands have basic land types, which means they're findable with fetch lands. So, now that we've gone through all these precons, you might be asking yourself, which one is the strongest, which one is the most unique, and which has the best reprint value? Honestly, I think Prismari Artistry is probably going to be the strongest deck out of the bunch. Spell slinging is heavily supported in Magic, and there are all flavors of upgrades that can take a deck like this to the next level. All 5 decks pass the value test, but 5 $10 plus reprints in the Lorehold Spirit deck is just insane, even if the Silverquill and Prismari decks are right there with it. I also expect the Lorehold deck to have better newcomers with a couple Spirit typal cards, an excellent Wrath effect, and a solid red card draw spell, so the long-term value is also likely better. And for most unique, we're calling it out twice, we've got Lorehold Spirit. It's just the most novel deck of the bunch. Silverquill Influence is probably great for precon battles, and Quandrix Unlimited lets you cast big dumb hydras, which is always a blast. While these decks are fairly standard in terms of strategy, except for Lorehold Spirit, which is very innovative, it's really rare that we get a slate of precons that has reprint value as good as this across the board. What are you guys thinking? Which is the coolest precon from Secrets of Strixhaven, and what are the best cards that have been shown so far? Let us know in the comments down below, and have a great day.